Hey guys, Mr. PF here again. Today I'm going to show you guys how you can make a cool light out of an old glass or even a plastic bottle. These work good for garage lights or maybe a night light for your kid. It's a pretty simple piece to make. It only requires a USB power source, so that's nice and simple. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to be using 6 10mm LEDs. You could use less or you could use more depending on the size of your bottle or how much light or difference in colors you want. I will also be using these artificial clear rocks. You find these things in fake fireplaces and some aquariums. If you're going to be wiring your LEDs from scratch like I did, you will also need proper resistors. I will be leaving links to everything you need in the description, so check that out. You can also get pre-wired LEDs, but if not, you'll need a soldering iron and at very least a hot glue gun and a spare USB cable. So first things first, before I'm going to put my LED in my helping hands, I always take my button cell batteries and test my LED to make sure it's working and it's not burnt out before I go through the hassle of soldering all up and finding out that it doesn't work. So now that I've confirmed my LED works, I'm going to go ahead and solder the resistor to the positive leg. Before I do that, I'm going to cut the positive leg down a little bit so that way both the legs won't be equal. Now I'm going to grab my resistor and go ahead and trim the leg on one side also. Then I'm going to add a little bit of flux and go ahead and solder the resistor to the LED leg that we just trimmed. Now your LED should look something like this. Now I'm going to grab another color and go ahead and do the same thing to it. So now you should have two LEDs that look the same. Now I'm going to twist my input lines of my resistors together, and I'm also going to solder the negative line of the LEDs together. I'm showing you here how I like to arrange my LEDs. I like to fold up the input lines on the resistors and then twist them together. That way it makes them a little bit more stable and easier to solder. So now once you're done with that, your LED should look a little something like this, facing back to back and the positive and negative legs joined together. I also added a piece of heat shrink on there. This first one I'm going to heat shrink, but the second two I'm just going to leave bare for the sake of the video so you can see what I'm talking about. Now go ahead and grab a piece of scrap wire. I'm just using these leftover wires I have from a broken HDMI cable. You only need two, one for positive and one for negative. For this video I'm using white for positive and blue for negative. Now go ahead and remove the insulation from the wires and solder the wires to the LED, and remember which one you're picking for positive and which one you're picking for negative. So now once you're done attaching the wires, your LEDs and your wires should look something like this. Now I'm going to go ahead and jump to where I have mine heat shrinked. So here's what mine looked like after I heat shrinked it. It's not perfect, but it will work and it will help keep it from shorting out against each other. So again, to save yourself from headache later, I'm just taking an extra USB cable I have here and making sure that my connections work and that both of my LEDs are working properly. So as you can see here, I jumped forward and finished the second set. It's the same exact process. All I did was use a different color LEDs, and then I just went ahead and put the wires from the first set of LEDs to the second set of LEDs with the same exact polarity. So now I'm just going to repeat that process with the leftover two LEDs that I have and then get ready to finish the rest of the project up. So now I'm back here and I have the last two LEDs finally soldered up and I have the whole harness put together. So again, I'm just going to plug in my USB and test them again before I put the rest of it together. So now to the fun stuff, putting the clear rocks in and arranging the LEDs the way you want. Like I mentioned before, they use these in a lot of artificial fireplaces and you can buy them on Amazon for pretty cheap. So I like to start with lining the bottom with a handful. If the mouth of your bottle is really small, you might have to try to see if you can find smaller ones. So now that I'm comfortable with the amount that I have on the bottom, I'm going to take our LED harness and I'm going to go ahead and place it into where I like. Depending on how you wired your LEDs and how big the mouth of your bottle is, it might take a little finessing to be able to get the LEDs into the place you want them. So now that I have my LEDs in a place that I like, I'm just going to go ahead and grab some more clear rocks and cover up some of the LEDs in there. So now that I've added enough clear rocks to cover up a couple more of the LEDs, I'm going to go ahead and push the harness down in there the rest of the way. You want to be careful here to make sure that you don't break any of the connections or bend anything into a place where it will short out, and you also want to make sure that you leave the input power wires remaining outside of the bottle. So here I've added the rest of my clear rocks. I'm a little bit short to fill the rest of the bottle, but sometimes it's kind of cool to leave a little bit out of the bottle. It kind of adds for a cool look. And you can also see that I've left the power input wires outside of the bottle. So now at this point we're just going to move on to the cap. If you don't have your cap for your bottle, you could probably use a piece of cork or something else that you could imagine up. For me, I'm just going to take a drill bit and drill a hole in the top of the cap that's the same size as the USB cord that I'm using. If you don't have a drill, you could probably also find some scissors or something else that you might be able to poke a hole in the lid with. So now if you don't already have a USB cable prepared, what you're going to want to do is take a spare USB cable, cut the end off that you're not using, and then go ahead and expose the positive and negative wires of that cable. Here I'm showing you a real fast way that you can expose the positive and negative wires. Most all USB cords are a little different, but usually the black wire is going to be the negative and the red wire is going to be the positive. It's always best to check with a spare LED if you haven't. We are not going to be using the white or the green wires, so you can go ahead and snip those off and discard of those. So now if you haven't already, now is a very good time to test to make sure everything is working properly. Now that you have your USB cable stripped, you should be remembering which one is positive and which one's negative. Go ahead and twist those wires together and give it a test. So as you can see, mine's working beautifully. So now I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next step. So now I'm back here and I have a hole drilled in my cap and I'm ready to wire the USB in. So it could be different for your bottle, but for my bottle it works out easiest to lay it on its side to wire the USB cable in. I'm going to put a couple small pieces of heat shrink over the wire leads on this side just because they're going to be in a spot that's pretty exposed and I don't want them to short out against each other. After that, go ahead and twist your positive and your negative wires together and then solder and shrink your heat shrink. So now at this point I like to take the extra slack out of the USB cable and then go ahead and secure the USB cable in the lid with some hot glue. At this point you're pretty much done. You just have to wait for the hot glue to dry and then go ahead and put the lid on. Now once you put your lid on, all you gotta do is find a cool spot on a shelf, or maybe in your garage or your man cave to place it. Plug it in with a USB and enjoy. If you want to see more content like this, please like, comment, and subscribe on my page, and thanks for watching.